speaker this week.
All right.
I'll start over. My name is Denny Wilford, and I am very proud to introduce our celebrity speaker this week, Captain Richard Rhinehart, the commander of the entire Kitsap Naval Base. Will be speaking as commanding officer. He is responsible for more than 1,700 military and civilian personnel that supports more than 70 tenant commands, 16,200 military personnel, 17,600 civilian employees, 7,500 defense contractor employees, and 34,000 family members. Welcome, Captain Rhinehart.
Yeah, thank you very much, Denny, and thank you to the entire group for having me today. It's really quite an honor. I also want to point out that, I've been called many things, but this was actually the first time I've been called celebrity. So I think that was, I'm going to add that one to the list, and it's much nicer than I think some of the other ones that were used earlier today. But really, it's really quite an honor to speak to the group today. I have about 15 slides and some accompanying remarks that I'll go through. I am going to go through them fairly quickly because I find the most interesting aspect is the question and answer at the end. But really, first, I'd just like to say, my name is Rich Rhinehart. I've been in the Navy for just over 27 years now. I actually started my career here in the Pacific Northwest. So my first boat was right here on the waterfront back from 96 to 99. So it was really great, what is very likely to be my last tour in the Navy, to come back here to the Pacific Northwest. And, I will say that I love the Pacific Northwest. I think that there is no better place to serve in the military on a couple of fronts. One is I think that we share such a strong maritime tradition with our community. And then you can add to that, I don't think that there's anywhere where we get better support from our community than right here in the Pacific Northwest. So I will say thank you for that. I think that it's those close ties that make it a great place to live and serve. This is also important to me today because I'm actually a Gig Harbor resident. So being able to talk to this group is very special to me. In fact, I was having dinner at Anthony's just the other day, and hopefully I'll see some of you out, more so Anthony's, Tides, Ned Shed, some of my favorite places out in town. So hopefully we'll see you there. And if you do, please say hello. If I don't recognize you, please come up and say hello. So I want to talk a little bit about who we are, what our relationship is with the community, and then also a little bit about where we're going. And then I will open it up for questions. So first, the next slide, please. So first, just real quick, the Navy. The Navy is about 340,000 strong now. We're the second largest military branch. I did a little bit and checked the numbers here. Since the early 2000s, we've really been a pretty consistent size, just under 300 ships, and that's pretty much where we are now. But we're not just kind of military in general, we're also people. And I always like to start with a couple of stories about the people that I serve with. And I'm going to talk about two in particular. First, Petty Officer Kai Dingman. She's a single mom who just wants to serve her country. She has 2 children. And then most recently, in addition to a 2-year-old, she has a relatively newborn. And she left on the USS Nimitz a little over a year ago to deploy. And she spent 11 months at sea with her children in the care of her sister. And I really like that story because this is really what a lot of the sailors have to do to serve their country. And it's really just an amazing sacrifice. And I love her story, and I love her service. Another one, Lieutenant Eli Bodie, he was my port operations officer until recently. He just retired. He retired after 22 years. He started as a quartermaster many years ago. And when he did the math, when he retired, he has a 13-year-old son, and he calculated he spent a total of 6 years of his son's life physically at sea. That's not on sea duty, but that's physically away from home, serving his country. So again, really pretty amazing service to do what amounts to as very important work. So we're not just your neighbors, we're no different than everybody else in the community, trying to put food on the table, trying to afford college for our kids, but also making sacrifices in order to serve. As already stated, Naval Base Kitsap is about 40,000 strong now, just north of Gig Harbor. And every single sailor, every single civilian who works on board the base has a story very similar to the two that I told. Next slide, please. So Naval Base Kitsap, what is Naval Base Kitsap? I would equate it to saying the county. So when you say Naval Base Kitsap, you were talking two things. One is a geographical area, but then you're also talking about what amounts to as a county, both governance and support for the community that live and work there. So I'm commander of the naval installation. What that means is I'm essentially the city manager and landlord for our tenants. What we do, those 1,700 plus about another 1,000 support people that provide additional support. We provide kind of the basic needs of life in any community: fire, police, utilities. We have about 1,700 housing units, 4,500 apartments we manage, childcare, parks and recreation, and then of course the infrastructure and maintaining the buildings, the roads, the utilities, all fall under the base. Next slide, please. We're really 5 different installations that back in 2004 were combined under one command. So this includes both the submarine base at Bangor, Jackson Park where the hospital is, Keyport where the Navy Undersea Warfare Center, the Manchester Fuel Depot just outside of Port Orchard, and then of course NBK Bremerton, which is mostly encompasses the shipyard. So this is over $10 billion of infrastructure. And what I'll tell you is it's probably the most strategically important and diverse installation that the Navy has. We're the 3rd largest Navy installation in size behind San Diego and Virginia. But strategically, we have some of the most important missions all kind of co-located here. About the only thing we don't have is an airfield, and based on the noise complaints that Whidbey gets, I'm not too sorry about that. Next slide, please. So who are we? What missions do we support? As stated in the introduction, we've got about 70 different commands that operate on the installation. We have almost 2 aircraft carriers. So we have the TR that's going to be pulling in here later this month. Pretty amazing capability. They have the ability to put 90 aircraft off the coast of any country. About 5,500 sailors serving on board the aircraft carriers. We have one of 4 nuclear repair capable shipyards. That's a pretty important capability, but not only that, we are the only shipyard on the Pacific coast capable of dry docking an aircraft carrier. And anybody who knows about maintenance of our ships, it's pretty incredible. Just like your vehicles come with a whole list of periodic maintenance, the aircraft carriers do as well. And one of the hardest things is to pull them out of the water, just like any boat. It needs to be done periodically. Well, I will tell you that aircraft carrier dry dock is booked 20, 30 years in advance, heel to toe, with ships and other vessels that require maintenance. Very complex scheduling, and that's one of the most important capabilities we have here because no one else can do it. The Strategic Weapons Facility. So recently, the Nuclear Posture Review validated that our nuclear triad would continue to rely predominantly on a sea-based deterrence. About 70% of our strategic capability is now based at sea, and we have about half of that here in the Pacific Northwest. So about 35% of our strategic capability is stationed here. We have 8 of our 14 ballistic missile submarines, slightly out of balance because the East Coast, even though they have an equal amount of our strategic resources, they actually support the United Kingdom's program. So that's why, even though we have more boats, we kind of share some of the capability evenly. Some of the most important research the Navy does is stationed here in terms of what NUIC does and their support of torpedoes and undersea unmanned vehicles. In addition, we have Submarine Development Squadron 5 that also operates and does some pretty amazing state-of-the-art research here in the Hood Canal and in the waters off the Pacific coast. The Manchester Fuel Depot, which you heard me talk about, that is home to 75 million gallons of fuel. That is the largest fuel depot in the continental United States. And it's right there outside of Port Orchard, but you would never know it because most of the tanks are actually below ground. In fact, if you drive by there on the ferry, you would almost never know it was there if there's not a vessel sitting next to the pier. So what else? McSIFBN, that's the Marine Corps Security Force Battalion, is actually the largest Marine Corps battalion in the country. It's about 1,200 sailors and soldiers, and they provide some of the perimeter security for the strategic weapons. So really what I would emphasize here is really this capability that we have, the commands that we support, it really cannot be recreated anywhere else in the world at any reasonable cost. That's how important the Pacific Northwest is to your Navy and your country. And it's right there north of where you sit there in Gig Harbor. Next slide, please. And we're still growing. I told you I looked at the size of the Navy just to get a historical perspective and validate. That's some of the growth that we've seen here over the last 17 years. And like I said, during that time, we've had about 282 back in 2004. And I think we're pretty close to that now, just a little bit bigger, but still under 300 ships in the Navy. So you've seen we've increased in the aircraft carrier SSBNs. We've expanded with two of the SSGNs, as well as 2 fast attack submarines. The Marine Corps Security Force Battalion has grown. We now have 16 Coast Guard vessels that are operating off the coast of off of the Bangor waterfront. Those vessels are important because they provide security for our strategic ballistic missile boats as they pull in and out of port. So think of them as the Secret Service of the submarine force. And I think everything else I've mentioned. So next slide. So real quick on the economic impact. Now these numbers are a little bit dated. They go back to the 2018 economic impact study that was done, but I think it's pretty close today. We're about a $4 billion business. It will take the next 18 employers on the Kitsap Peninsula behind us in order to match our economic output. So that's pretty much ties us very closely to the economy of really the entire peninsula and the future of the peninsula. We pretty much share that. We're an important part of the community, and we work very hard to integrate with that community. It says 34,000 daily workers. That was back in 2018. We're actually closer to 40, a little bit higher, upwards to 42,000 now. For the most part, that has to do with the aircraft carrier, as well as the fact that the shipyard has hired a couple thousand people since this study was done. To put in perspective, nationwide, Washington ranks 10th of all states for DoD and government funding. And again, a lot of that is the Navy with the Army and the Air Force right there with us. But we're not just inside the fence line. Next slide, please. Really, the Navy operates all over the Pacific Northwest. The Hood Canal, Dabob Bay, we have agreements with Washington State Parks where we support Navy Special Warfare. That's the SEALs. The SEALs do some very specialized training that they can't do anywhere else in the country. And it has to do with the currents that we have and the deep water, the cold water, that really creates a very unique environment where they can't do that training anywhere other than here in the Pacific Northwest. So we share these sea transit lanes with our community, but the reality is we're a very small fraction of it, much less than 5% of the traffic out there. In fact, I think it's much smaller than that, really just based on the Port of Tacoma and Seattle, some of the largest container ports in the country. About 8,700 vehicles daily going in and out of Bremerton. Anybody who's gone along the Gorst is familiar with that. So really based on kind of the breadth of what we do here in the Pacific Northwest, I can't emphasize enough the importance of our environmental stewardship. Next slide, please. And really what we've learned is environmental stewardship is really good for the Navy. We pretty much lead not just the Navy, but the DoD in terms of our efforts here. And really a lot of it has to do with our partnership with the community. And I just want to highlight on a couple of those. In particular, we've used what's called the Readiness Environmental Protection Initiative. These are DoD funds that we can tap into that allow us really to protect our mission. And what it means is that we are looking at the lands around our installation and seeing where development of those lands could be counterproductive to our mission. So what I'll focus on is that picture, and if you see where the Hood Canal is, we rely on the quiet waters of the Hood Canal, the deep quiet waters, in order to do the acoustic research that we do there. Just absolutely amazingly beautiful. You know, I don't need to tell this group how important that area is to the people who live here. And what we've been able to do is to tap into these DoD funds and purchase jointly with our land trust partners easements that allow things like deforestation, which is perfectly fine. It doesn't interfere with our ability to support the mission. But what it does do is that the easements prevent some of the large-scale development that often happens after the deforestation. So we work with the land trust really to try to protect and preserve the land in its current state. That becomes a win-win for us, because it allows us to protect our mission, and it's a win for the land trust because they get more money to invest, and certainly a win for the community because we preserve the beautiful Pacific Northwest in its current state. So that's just one example, and I can go into more, but what I will say is the people who live and work here have worked very hard to take care of the lands that the country has entrusted with us. Next slide, please. And of course, we face some of the same challenges that our community does. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I will point out, you know, the GORST, certainly very important to the Navy. We watch it closely. We've done studies for natural disasters, tsunami, earthquake effects with the Seattle fault that runs straight through the Sinclair Inlet there. And really, there's been some amazing studies that have been done and what happens to that vital freightway in the event of an earthquake. And it's not good for the Navy, and it's certainly not good for the community. And we share that concern with our community, and we've been working to get the important transportation dollars needed for our resiliency in terms of our ability to do our mission. Next slide, please. And of course, we continue to invest. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly here. Some of our investments, I've got three that I'm going to highlight today. The first is called SIOP. Some of you may have heard it in the news. It's the Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Plan, where the Navy is looking at its 4 nuclear capable shipyards and realizing that they're fairly old and they desperately need updated. So it's a study that's being done. They estimate it's going to cost about $21 billion funneled to these 4 shipyards over the next 20 years to really modernize them and ensure their viability for the next 50. So these funds right now are not appropriated. So this is still pre-decisional for the Navy and for the government. But this is one of the Navy's highest priorities here in the near term to ensure that we can continue to take care of our fleet, because we won't have a fleet if we don't have a place to repair them. Next slide, please. Next, I'll touch on the Manchester Fuel Depot. This is, again, a 10-year project. Those underground tanks were put in shortly, right around World War II, shortly after World War II. And we're looking to do some important upgrades, put in some tanks that are updated, have more modern safety features, and then are just a little bit less risky from an environmental standpoint. So these upgrades will happen over a course of 10 years at a cost of, the cost is still a little squishy, 240 upwards to $300 million. So the good news is the first phase of that'll be done in three three-year phases. The first phase was just awarded at a cost of $53 million. That contract was just awarded. So that construction will start here shortly. Next slide, please. And then finally, we'll talk about Columbia class. This is, of course, the DoD's #1 priority here is ensuring our long-term strategic deterrence capability. And what that means is the development of the Columbia class submarine, and then the modifications that have to happen up here in the Pacific Northwest in order to support it. Those studies are currently underway, and we will be working with the Navy to help prioritize the projects needed to support the Columbia class when it comes to the Pacific Northwest here by 2032. Next slide, please. I'm not going to talk about COVID. I kept this slide in here really just to tee it up if you wanted to talk about kind of our response and how we worked with the local Kitsap Public Health, as well as the cities of Bremerton, the state of Washington. I'm happy to comment on that. Next slide, please. And then finally, I can't say enough about the great partnership we have with our community. You know, we have mutual aid agreements for both the fire and police. We're all mutual jurisdiction. So a lot of our police response on the installation is with our local law enforcement partners. We train with them. We have some law enforcement training areas at Jackson Park where we work with military working dogs from across the state of every type, from FBI, Washington State Patrol, NCIS, all train here at NBK at various times. And really that is so that if for some reason some of the atrocities you see at other installations happen here, we are ready to respond jointly with our law enforcement partners. So really an amazing relationship. Fire and emergency services, the same thing. We work very closely with our communities. Explosive ordnance, we provide services really to the entire Olympic Peninsula, as well as hazmat response. We have some of the only hazmat response capability, again, on the Olympic Peninsula. So in the event of a serious accident, we will respond with our community. So that's about all I'm going to go into there. Next slide, please. The only thing I'll say is certainly if you have any questions that I don't answer today or would like to follow up with anything, there is our contact information. And with that, I will turn it over to questions.
Well, I have a question. This is probably the dumbest question you're going to get, but do you have a PR department, or can you do tours of any part of the installation, the public?
Boy, that's actually a great question. So we do. Solana, I think you were in touch with Chris Stannis, who's our new public affairs officer. He would be the one to talk to about that. We do work tours periodically. That's been very difficult, obviously, the last year. We're still currently not going on submarines at all, but we are trying to find new opportunities to do, if nothing else, a windshield tour where it's appropriate. Now, as we look at opening up for tours right now, it's very much restricted to people in key leadership roles that basically need the exposure in order to help them in their decision making. So that's a lot of people from Olympia, our local community, trying to get some of the local electeds onto the installation. Now, I think we'll continue to open that aperture. And I think, you know, being able to open it up to some of the other groups, junior ROTC, some of the other community groups like the Kiwanis and the Rotary, I think that certainly is something we desire to do. How soon that's going to happen, I don't know. I think we just have to watch how COVID progresses here in the coming months.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
A question, if I could, Captain.
Yes,
thank you for your presentation. I, for one, did not realize the size of the economic and environmental impact that Naval Base Kitsap has, and how important it is for our entire region. So the question I have is, are you receiving from our elected representatives the support you need to do what you have in front of you over the next several years?
Wow, that is a great question. And I like the way you phrased it. And I will say, you know, I've been in this job for 2 years now. I was in submarines for my previous 25 years. This is my first step into the installation world. And it is one of the things that I have really enjoyed the most is my interactions with some of our local community, whether you're talking about the Kitsap County, you know, county commissioners, the mayors, Paulsbo, Bremerton, the port authorities, our local electeds, whether it's Representative Kilmer, you know, Senator Randall, and boy, I can go down the list. I think I have an incredible relationship with them. We communicate very regularly. They, you know, they know what our concerns are, and I'm very appreciative of the support we've seen. But thank you very much for asking. I think the support we see in our local elected community is very much a reflection of the general population and how the general population feels about the military.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for your service.
Yeah, my pleasure, Dan.
I have a question. Captain, this is Lieutenant Ray Valenga, Naval Reserve, inactive. And we lost a carrier down here in San Diego the other day. It sailed out to sea and it was headed to Bremerton. I wonder if it got up there and we understand it took 30,000 people with it. Can you comment on that, please?
I'm sorry, I'm not tracking, and maybe I just missed something. I'm sorry.
It was an aircraft carrier. It did leave San Diego, and I understood it was going to Bremerton. And when you add up all the jobs that are associated with it, on the news, they reported like 30,000 people would be displaced from here to the Bremerton area.
Yes, so I apologize. I know what you're talking about now. I initially thought you were discussing something else, and that got my mind moving in the wrong direction. Yes, the TR is coming this way. She will be here later this month. Certainly there is about 3,500 cruise complement that will be coming up, not including the families. And I think what you'll see is, you know, that definitely will have an impact. It is a growth. I think you saw when I was looking at the numbers, I said the 34,000 number that was on the slide in 2018 was closer to 42,000 now. And that's why I'm including the TR, and that's about 3,500 people and their families. So is that going to be a significant change on the community? Yes. Is it one we've seen before? Yes, because the Carl Vinson was here, and she was stationed here during her overhaul before she departed. So I think what you saw is about a 1-year gap where the Vinson left, and now you've got the TR coming back in. And again, I think that we will see an impact, but I think that we've gone through it before, and the community is certainly able to support the tail that comes with the TR.
Yeah, thank you.
We have time.
Now, that said, I do want to comment on that, and if I could, I think that does highlight some of the challenges that we share with our community that I do work with some of the electeds on, and I'll just say, affordable housing, childcare, transportation issues, all of those are very high on our list that military families are faced with. Certainly the TR families are going to face that coming up here. And really, that's really no different than many of you are probably seeing either yourselves or your friends or your children.
Well, it certainly should give a boost to the economy up here, or up there, I should say.
Yes, indeed.
We have time for one more question if there's any more. Barry?
Captain, this is Denny Wilford.
Oh.
I saw on your, and I'm familiar with seeing volunteers helping out different things. Can you talk just a little bit about that? I saw community service and volunteerism. Yeah.
So we have volunteer coordinators, and Chris, if you reach out to his information, it was on the slide. He can put you in touch with our volunteer coordinator. But we certainly have people, if you just let us know at an event, we can try to help coordinate volunteers to come out and try to support. That did slow for quite a while. So we're sort of building all of that back up. But it slowed not because we didn't have people who are ready to get out there. It slowed because the community stopped asking. So I think we're very much ready. We've got a lot of people who are ready to come out and volunteer. We're reestablishing a lot of the relationships we had with the schools. I know they're very happy to have us back. So please reach out, and we'll do everything we can. And if NBK proper can't support, we can reach out to the tenant commands and kind of leverage them. So we're trying to build partnerships, I think, between some of our community organizations and the particular commands, so that some of that is a little bit lasting and a little bit more regular.
Well, thank you. I've actually seen that in action quite a few times.
Okay, good.
Excellent question, Denny. Because I'm going to hole-in-one volunteers.
Volunteers. Mary, so did you have a question?
I was just curious when you were talking about the new submarines, where do they get built?
So they get built. There are a couple of shipyards that are capable of building submarines. Electric Boat in Groton, Connecticut, and the Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia. They jointly build submarines. And we've done that specifically to try to maintain 2 shipyards capable of building submarines. That's important from a national infrastructure standpoint.
Well, Captain, I cannot thank you enough on behalf of our Rotary for coming. Thank you very much for your service and for showing up and communicating that with us.
Well, thank you very much. This was my honor to be here, and really thank you to each of you for what you do for our community. You know, I really believe in your mission, and this was my honor to come talk to you today. So well, I hope to see you out there in Gig Harbor.
Hey, one question. Are you retiring to Gig Harbor? Just checking.
You know, it's, I would love to. I think that I have a fiance in Atlanta who would object strongly to that.
Well,
but I do love Gig Harbor. I will definitely miss it. I live right on the harbor, so it's that's going to be a view that I'm going to miss.
Oh, thank you again. And before we close this meeting, there is a midday charity meeting immediately following. So if you're on the board or if you want another meeting today, stay on. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Thank you again, Richard. Captain, celebrity.
Hey, Lorna, turn off the recording.